Hi everyone, this is Steph Giordano with HSRI, and you're watching the ODESA demonstration for group users. As a reminder, a group user is a person who, when you log into the system, will only have access to the surveys for which you are responsible. Right now on your screen you see the ODESA login page. When you get here, you want to be sure that at the top of the screen you see National Core Indicators 2015-2016 to ensure that you're entering data for the correct survey cycle. When you first receive information to log into the ODESA, you'll get a username and a temporary password, which you'll change upon the first time logging into the system. If you ever do forget your password information, you can click Account Help, enter your email address, and click Submit. When logging into the system, you may be asked if you want to save your username and password. Please do not do that for the security of the information you'll be entering. We're now on the first page of the ODESA system. From here you can go into a few different tabs, either the reports. This will tell you how many surveys you've started and finished to date. You can also go into the download screen if you want to print off a copy of the adult consumer survey or any of the family surveys. But mostly you'll be spending time on the surveys page. This is where you'll see all of the surveys that you've started and finished. For most of you, when you log into the surveys page for the first time, it will be completely blank and you will start adding new surveys. For some of you, you'll have at least a few surveys in here, the ones that have been assigned to you by your coordinator. For those of you who will be starting surveys from scratch, you begin one by clicking New Survey. You'll enter a survey code, a region if it's applicable for your state, and click Next. And this brings you to the main data entry screen for the adult consumer survey. Let's close out of here for just a moment. For those of you who will have surveys assigned to you rather than start new surveys, when you log into the ODESA, what you'll see on your survey screen is a list of all of the surveys that have been started and sent over to you. To get into those surveys, you just click the appropriate survey code, and that will again bring you to the main part of the data entry screen for the adult consumer survey. The consumer survey follows the same path as the paper copy of the surveys. You can either use this table of contents over here on the left to navigate through the survey, or you can hide the table of contents and just click through to the next and previous pages as you go. As you click the previous or next page, any data that you are working on the current page will automatically be saved. However, if you'll be on a page for a little bit longer than normal, or if you have spotty internet, we suggest that you click the Save button every so often. Also, if you are going to close out of a survey before finishing it, you want to click Save on the last page that you're working on to save all of the information on that page, and then you can close out of the survey. Okay, so let's get into some data entry. So this first question here, BI3, which is the person's zip code, is handled a little bit differently than other questions. So for this data entry piece, you'll first want to click Lookup, and it'll open up a pop-up box on your screen. So you'll want to make sure that any pop-up blocker is turned off for this site. You're going to enter the person's zip code, click Select, and you'll see that this transforms automatically into the residential setting. So this person is in a metropolitan setting, for example. We have a few logic checks that are built into the system. For example, date of birth. If you put in that the person was born in 2000, the system will recognize that that person is not in fact an adult. So when you try to go on to the next page, you will be stopped and a message will appear telling you that question BI4 needs to be changed and has to fall within a date range of January 1st, 1900 to June 30th, 1998. You can either go down to that question or click the question in blue here and make any kind of change that's necessary. We have a few other basic logic checks that are built into the background information section. For example, if the person is female. When we get into questions about health, there are a few questions that are gender and age specific. So starting with BI 25, if the person is female, when was her last pap test? So this question is open. It will not allow you to check off not applicable because the person was indicated as female. So if you try and click next again, it will pop up with that issue saying that question BI 25 has to be a different answer. Question BI 26 and 27, although pertaining to females, 27 is for both males and females, the person is under 50 and under 40, so these questions are automatically checked off, not applicable for you. So I mentioned earlier that the ODESA and paper copies of the Adult Consumer Survey fall in line with one another. We do have one slight exception to this, and that's in the Employment and Other Daily Activities section. Here, rather than having the questions listed out in grid form, they are listed vertically. And for each grouping of questions, you only see the applicable questions. So for example, if the person was engaged in a paid community job, you'll ask or find out the number of hours the person worked and the gross wages, as well as whether the person gets publicly funded services or supports to participate in the activity. Scrolling down, we ask questions about unpaid activities. So you may find out that the person is engaged in an unpaid community activity. Then we would ask about number of hours worked in that unpaid activity, but then we would not have that question about number of wages because it is unpaid. All right, so we get the idea here. We're going to jump over to section 1 of the survey. This starts off with those general instructions. That's the do's and don'ts of conducting section 1 with the individual. Then we have the introductory script that can be used to introduce the project to the person. And then we have this agreement to participate, which is pretty important. This is acknowledgement that the interviewer let the person know that it is their choice to participate in the survey. For all the questions throughout the survey, we have skip patterns built into the ODESA system. So you'll see here, starting with questions about the home. Do you like your home or where you live? If the person says no, you'll be able to answer question 2. If in between or no, what don't you like about where you live? You check off all the reasons that the person doesn't like where they live, and then move on to question 3. If, however, question 1 is a to response, which is, yes, I like where I live, question 2 gets checked off, not applicable automatically. Similarly, in the employment and other daily activities questions, we have these skip patterns built in. So do you have a paid job in the community? If it's a yes, then question 8 gets checked not applicable automatically because it's about people who do not have a job. And questions 9 and 10 will open up. So do you like working there and would you like to work somewhere else? If, however, the person does not have a paid job in the community, then question 8 opens up and 9 and 10 get checked off, 98 not applicable. You'll also see for some of these questions here, there's this little rephrasing of the question along with the bell symbol. That just indicates that there may be information in your pre-survey form that has a familiar name or term that can be used with the individual when asking these questions. So again, you'll just go through this section 1, check off the appropriate answers, and finally end up at the end of section 1 questions. And this is really important. This is how we determine whether the survey will be used for data analysis. So the question here asks whether the person was able to understand most questions and did they answer in a consistent manner. We want you to check off yes If the person was able to answer any questions in section 1, this means if even 1 or 2 questions were asked and answered in a manner that the interviewer felt was valid, then 43 should be marked off yes, the person was able to give consistent and valid responses to the questions that were answered. That also means that throughout section 1, only those questions that the person was able to give a valid response to should be marked with the appropriate response. All other questions that the person was unable to give a clear or valid response to should be checked off 99, which is a don't know or unclear response. So this no response here should only be used if the person was not able to answer any questions in section 1. So then we're going to move on to section 2. This is where a proxy respondent may be used. We start off with general instructions about conducting section 2 with the person, and then move into questions about community inclusion. So for all of the questions in section 2, we have this respondent option, and this is just for the interviewer to indicate who answered the question, and we do ask for every question in section 2 that this be checked off. If the individual is answering section 2 along with another person, another proxy respondent, and both people answer the question, we want you to check off that it's the individual who answered. If a family is answering on behalf of the individual and that family member also happens to be the person's staff, we ask that you check off it's a family member who answered the questions. So for these community inclusion questions, they mostly all follow a similar pattern, which is asking how many times in the past month the person has done an activity, and then who they typically go with if they've done that activity. So if the person has not gone out shopping, for instance, you check off this 0 response, and the follow-up who you usually go with gets checked off not applicable. If you know how many times the person's gone, you check off that number of times, and then you answer who the person typically goes with. 2 exceptions to the community inclusion rule are question 49, do you participate in community groups or other activities? This is just a yes or no response. If it is a yes response, however, we still want to know who the person's typically going with. And question 50 is, in the past year, did you go away on vacation? And again, this is a yes or no response. And if the person has gone away, you want to ask who they've typically gone with. All right, so you get the idea of how to code section 2. Don't forget the respondent. And let's jump over to those questions about self-directed support. So this question, or these questions, will only be asked to individuals who are self-directing any of their services or supports. And you'll know this based on pre-survey question 10 and or background information question 53. If the person is not self-directing at all, you click off no, and you'll just jump over to some questions for the surveyor. If it's a yes response, however, the section opens up and you'll answer possibly the rest of the section. So there's one more qualifier here, and that's question 68. Whether the person who's responding, and it may be a proxy respondent, whether that person participates in decisions about using the supports, hiring staff, or managing the services the person gets. If it's a yes, then you go ahead and ask the remainder of the section. Again, if it's a no, though, you're going to jump over to these end of section 2 questions. So these questions just ask some basic things about the survey, who were all the people who took part in section 2 of the survey. This is just because those respondent boxes throughout section 2 only allow for one respondent type. We asked for some feedback about the survey, how long it took to complete, and whether there are any questions that were difficult to ask or to get answered, and then some things about where the survey was held. When you're done entering information, you click Save and Close, or you can click Finish, click OK, and come back to the main survey grid in the ODESA. Now, if you did click Finish, but you need to go in and edit some information, you can still do so by clicking the survey code in blue, going in and editing any information you need, then clicking Save and closing out again, and that will save any new changes to the survey. And that takes us to the end of our ODESA demonstration. Thank you all so much for listening. Bye.